Welcome to the Feminine Waters podcast, where we discuss dating, relationships, celibacy, and the divine feminine.
Welcome to the
Let's
Feminine
dive in.
Waters podcast, where we discuss dating, relationships, celibacy, and the divine feminine. Let's dive in.
Where we discuss dating, relationships, celibacy, and the divine feminine. Let's dive in.
All right, listeners, welcome back to another episode of the Feminine Waters podcast. I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Chiquita.
And we are here with our very first male guest, so we're really excited. And he is the author of the book, You Are Not Broken, a holistic guide for men and women to heal the pathways of sexual dysfunction and restore relational harmony together. That is a very long title, and I love it. We have Brooke Hazen here with us today.
Thank you for having me on as your first guest, male guest.
Yes. Welcome to the Feminine Waters podcast. We're so excited to have you. So we'll just start off by asking, Brooke, give us your story. Tell us who you are. Tell us why we're here today.
Okay, well, I never thought I'd be an author and doing podcasts, but a few years ago, I started noticing the symptoms of erectile dysfunction, sexual dysfunction, and I was pretty terrified, desperate. I immediately reached out to mainstream Western medicine because that's really the only sort of panacea that's given. Pharmaceutical EDs are given for erectile dysfunction for men. But I experienced a lot of side effects, and it was debilitating for me. And I experimented with different ones, hoping that some would work, but they were all mechanical and exacting and had debilitating side effects that didn't resonate with my creative flow and my soul and my heart. So I started increasingly getting more depressed as this process was closing out on me, and there was no solutions offered to me by mainstream Western medicine to ever recover a vibrant sexual function naturally again. So I was on my own, and I started deeply praying to God. I'm a spiritual person my whole life, and but I'd never come with such an urgent message, and this was very real, and it affects millions of men right now, and that's why I've written this book. But I started praying at first I was still out of my control behind my prayer, which was to give me a medication that worked, that was natural, that didn't have side effects. And my last trial still had side effects. And at that point, I fell into a deep spiral of depression for weeks at a time. And at that point, I started praying for something different. I actually had come to the end of the line, and I really had no control anymore over the situation. And that's when I completely released myself into God's arms and said, God, I don't know what to do anymore. Please, I pray to you for a healing miracle, because I don't know what to do. And after some weeks, I actually started experiencing the first enlightenment for me was coming upon a website called Your Brain on Porn by Gary Wilson. But that letting go to God, that completely releasing myself of any sort of control or and letting go completely to God was what started my whole healing journey that went beyond just recovering a vibrant sexual function beyond my wildest dreams, but a complete transformation of who I am to become the being God wanted me to be in relationships, in life, on a physical level, a mental, emotional, and spiritual level. I'm going to get into a couple very profound teachings that are in the same vein as I find it very interesting that this process of completely letting go to God is very much a part of what I recommend in the first part of my book, that are fundamental to the transformation that takes place in my book for sexual health, as well as relational health and physical health. And this letting go is letting go of the addictions and negative habits, letting go of the cultural, familial, and corporate peer pressure that's exerted on all of us, in which we all seem to, just as good consumers, we mimic. But also letting go of the addictions. We have a lot of addictions that do not serve our best interests for who we want to be and our health, how we feel and how we want to look as far as our bodies. And this covers our addictions to around sex, around diet, around medical approaches, and all those aspects. So anyways, that pretty much covers my story. And after this, I'm hoping we could talk in detail more about what this pornography addiction entails for men, because it is quite devastating right now for men, what's happening.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. First of all, thank you so much for being so open and so transparent. We are all for the transparency here on the Feminine Waters podcast. So we really appreciate it. And a lot of the things you said, I could resonate with, even though I'm a woman, right? I know what it's like because I unfortunately was exposed to pornography at a very young age, masturbation, things like that. And it really does take a toll on you as a being. And surrendering to God, I loved that you said that, because I know that I had found myself in a series of toxic relationships because I was making the wrong choices, both, in choosing partners and then also sexually as well, and I had gotten to a point in my life where I just had to surrender and be like, God, hey, like, how can I make a turnaround? How can I attract a healthy relationship? And he led me to sexual abstinence, so I know that we're probably going to get into that a little bit later too, about semen retention and things like that. Yeah. I do have one more question for you really quick, and then I'll definitely give Tiffany the floor because I know she has questions as well. You talked a lot about pornography and how obviously it affected you physically because you were suffering from erectile dysfunction, but how did it affect you spiritually? How did porn affect you spiritually?
Well, profoundly, because basically this letting go to God allows the letting go of our addictions and these preconceptions, misconceptions, myths that we have, the negative habits, the peer pressure we experience, family pressure. Letting go of those addictions actually allows God's light to come into us. And that's the problem that men are experiencing, and women. This book is for men and women. It's just that men have higher addiction rates at 86%, and women are more around 25%, 24%. So there's a higher level for men. But so letting go of these addictions, letting go of this pornography addiction, and it is an addiction, which I'll tell you why it is. Allow an addiction also to ejaculation for men, and to a lesser extent orgasm for women too. But letting go of these addictions allows the light of God to enter into us, which allows us to have a deeper relationship with God and with life, and to fulfill our roles to become the ideal being that God wants us to be in life.
I am wondering if like the first part is like letting go and releasing to God. I'm just like wondering if this would be helpful to atheists, like because I'm always like, who do they even talk to? Who do they release to? I don't know. But I'm just like wondering if that's the first part, then like where do you go from there? Because you're not doing that. But that's just a random thought. But I did want to know, because I know that you're in our...
We could call it the organized universe.
Yeah, that's true. I do want to know, because to go into like your background a little bit, like you're an organic farmer. And so I wanted to know, like, when did that come about? Like, were you already into organic farming, or did that come about while writing this book?
Oh, no, that was basically once I got out, even in college, I was apprenticing and got into it right outside of college, and I've been doing it for 25 years now.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
And that's my main passion.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah, since I know you work with like a lot of holistic things and herbal remedies, I was just wondering, like, that was already part of your life.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've always leaned towards holistic health. It's just with erectile dysfunction, I'm really the first person to come out and offer a fully holistic approach that if people actually follow all the recommendations in my book, the protocol that I lay out, they will see transformation on a sexual, physical, relational, and spiritual level. But I don't believe that there is any real holistic guidance for men right now in the sexual dysfunction world, and women. This is for men and women.
Okay, so I'd like to get a better understanding of semen retention from you. This is something that I came across for the first time in my life last year, watching some videos on YouTube, and there were men talking about semen retention and all the benefits. Actually, I was in a talk on Clubhouse when I first heard about it. It was a group of men who are practicing sexual abstinence. They're waiting until marriage to have sex, and they brought up semen retention. I started to do some research on YouTube, like, what is this? So please tell us what semen retention is and some of the benefits, especially the ones that you've experienced personally.
Okay, well, semen retention basically, I don't know if women are aware the immense toll that ejaculation has on men, but the moment that ejaculation occurs, the body pulls all the most precious resources to replace the vital sperm. And a intense refractory period of replenishment starts at that point that weaves up and down for 2 weeks, where men experience extreme mood swings and fatigue and distancing in the relationship. This is also has to do with what we call satiety and novelty. So basically when we talk about how quitting pornography and semen retention helps with relationships, you have to look at what we call, the brain has evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to develop two major behavioral pathways, what we'll call mating and bonding behaviors. Now, Western society practice really promotes in our relationships and with our sexual practices just solely mating behavior, which is the sole goal of sex and really the goal of reaching climactic driven sex. And the brain, the mating part of our brain, as its goal is actually to procreate with as much genetic diversity as possible and novelty. So this is called novelty. And with the pornography issue, men, when they ejaculate, or they're watching pornography, their dopamine levels crash. So this novelty is what addicts men so badly, and this ejaculation process to pornography is what is so addictive. And actually, the dopamine crashes and the receptors crash to the same levels it does for cocaine and morphine addicts. And that's where we don't realize how intense and real this addiction to pornography is. The brain actually, we'll say men in this case, but women also, but we'll say men, when they're watching pornography, the brain actually believes that it's on a successful campaign of mating with a highly diverse genetic group of beautiful women. So all these men are already in relationship, but they're in relationship and fornicating with their devices. They're not actually living real life. And so how this translates into semen retention and relationships is that we can practice what Tao, Tantra, and Karetsa do is they supplant the mating behavior with bonding behaviors. And what this does is it satisfies that the mating drive, which is, it's pretty much impossible to get rid of, but it satisfies that while it also gives us what we truly want, which is long-lasting relationships that can last a lifetime. We can do that with bonding behaviors. Bonding behaviors mean, sensual caressing, deep listening, eye gazing, holding, caressing, hugging, embracing, and it's a dance rather than just a goal-driven act with the end result of ejaculation and orgasm. But what is so insidious about mating behaviors in relationships is that the same process that happens for men with pornography, where they deplete their dopamine and they distance themselves, they become satiated with their virtual image on pornography. They have to keep going on to more intense novelty in order to get the same dopamine levels met. The same process happens in the relationship, where the brain actually believes that it has fulfilled its mandate of mating with one mate, which would be you at this moment. And then it can happen insidiously with different excuses or images, but they may, what they'll do is they'll start looking for a novel mate at that point. And that's why we have this epidemic of divorce that's ripping the fabric of our relationships apart. It's pornography, it's ejaculation, and it's mating behavior. And all these, I'm friends with Marnia Robinson, who wrote Cupid's Poisoned Arrow. She wrote the review for my book. And her husband, Gary Wilson, just passed away last year. He wrote Your Brain on Porn. And she was telling me about the reason she wrote the book was because she wanted to understand why the relationship she got in always ended up in the same cycles. And what I recommend in my book, these practices, are actually invaluable tools for how we can have healthy relationships. We haven't had the tools because we're being misinformed by whatever, society, corporations, what have it. We're being misinformed. We just don't have the tools, but now we have the tools. And by letting go of these addictions, it's so simple, it's so free. And I won't say it's easy, because for men to quit the pornography addiction, they have to make a profound connection with how the deep depression and loss of identity that they're experiencing is directly related to their addiction to pornography. It is causing erectile dysfunction. And this isn't just for older men. There's actually virgins who have been unable to get aroused and have sex with a woman. It's all ages. And it's not if, it's when, because men will eventually get erectile dysfunction as they continue to watch pornography and ejaculate to pornography.
Wow. So a lot of great information. I know you want to get this out to women. How would you propose a woman bringing this up to the man in their life and giving them your book or something?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because I don't have a lot of good answers. All I can say is that I'm very saddened for what's happening, because the pornography epidemic has triggered a relationship epidemic for women. But I recommend reading my book. I recommend having clear discussions with your partner about that pornography, ejaculation, and mating-based climactic-driven sex is not healthy for the relationship. It's inevitably going to poison that relationship. It doesn't matter how well planned out that relationship is and how great a fit and match that a couple is. Even the best, most destined couples cannot overcome this neurology, this effect that happens with the mating brain and with mating behaviors and with ejaculation, satiety, novelty. All these concepts, the neurology cannot be overcome easily, and men cannot overcome the effects of this pornography addiction easily either. No man is strong enough to overcome the ravages of ejaculatory addiction to pornography. And it has, you can notice it in men because they will exhibit, fatigue, irritability, anger. They won't be really available in the relationship. They're unable to really connect and to communicate deeply with their partner, just unable to, because their neurology is completely devastated by the addiction, the dopamine crashes. I mean, it'd be like expecting a cocaine addict or morphine addict to be able to have a meaningful relationship. It's probably not going to happen until they give up that addiction to that drug. Well, the brain does not see any difference between an addiction to a physical substance and a neurological addiction, which is what pornography addiction is. It's called porn-induced erectile dysfunction, and this is a real thing. And this translates into our relationships. The problem is men are so addicted to pornography that they actually begin to replace their partners with pixels on a screen, because their brain does not differentiate between a real life partner and these fantasies. So the hope is incredible, because there's hundreds of thousands of men and women that have joined the NoFap forums, which is NoFap. It stands for no masturbation to, basically no PMO, no pornography, no masturbation, no orgasm. And they have gotten tired of this fantasy that they're living in, where they cannot perform sexually, they cannot have meaningful relationships, and they've given up the virtual reality to pornography and to other similar type of, computer-driven imagery. And they want real life connective relationships. They want to live life. And so what happens when we give up this dopamine addiction is the light of God's able to shine into us again, and we're able to truly live life passionately, intensely, the way we were meant to live. And that now we're able to work on our physical health more easily. We're able to work on relational health more easily. But until these addictions are stripped, it's going to be impossible to have a meaningful relationship and to have the kind of health that we're looking for on all levels, whether it's physical or spiritual or emotional.
Such great information. And Tiffany and I are a part of the NoFap community. So
great.
Yeah, we know that life.
Great.
Yeah. So, and one of the things that really stood up. Go ahead.
I did want to answer your question though about semen, the benefits of semen retention. So, it's funny because men automatically freak out when they hear about semen retention. They say, well, okay, fine, but how long till I can ejaculate again? Like, can I do it once in a while? And there's another myth around this, that actually semen retention actually creates, a much more enhanced and long sexual experience for men, and which is more in alignment with women, because most of the time women are just getting warmed up with men when men are finished, and it's not in alignment. But it actually heals sexual dysfunction, erectile dysfunction, because your chi sexual energy, that incredible vitality that's in our semen, is retained within our body, within our mind, within our soul. So it has tremendous benefits. There's really, I have to say, in my book, I don't recommend ejaculating ever. And that shocks people, but I'm not here to succumb to what other people want me to be. I'm fearless. I've gone on my own path with God, and I'm forging new territory, and I'm helping others. And I would say that, there's no problem with never ejaculating again. Honestly, ejaculation was meant to be for procreating, not for recreational sex, which is what most people are doing 99% of the time.
So what do you say to the guys who are like, wait, if I'm not ejaculating, then what's the point of sex? Where's the pleasure?
I'm glad you brought that up, because so in higher level Tantra, there's something called full body orgasm, ejaculation without semen release. So basically the semen release part is what we're avoiding. And because it's basically almost like sneezing. Basically, you stop yourself from sneezing. You still have the same experience of building up to it. And when you have a full body orgasm, your body shakes. Instead of your lingam ejaculating, your entire body ejaculates, and you're having a much more deeper experience because you're enjoying the process along the way, rather than when you ejaculate after a few minutes, 5 minutes, whatever, pulling away from your partner and the distancing that takes place and the mood swings and the fatigue is awful. You don't have any of that with semen retention.
So basically these guys don't know what they're missing out on.
Basically, yes, because again, so much of what we're taught is not healthy for us. We as a Western culture, when it comes to everything, we have it backwards. When it comes to healthcare, with pharmaceutical and surgical approaches only. When it comes to our diet, which is based in saturated fats, carcinogenic, health-harming foods. When it comes to intermittent fasting, where we can give up a meal to lose weight. When it comes to pornography, when it comes to climactic-driven sex, where the sole goal is ejaculation, we are taught to follow these lifestyles, but they are poisonous to who we want to be. So yes, basically men are missing out completely, entirely, 100% on the beauty they can experience in life by simply letting go of these addictions.
All right. So, Brooke, something that you said earlier that really stood out to me was that, and I've noticed this, and, I'm so glad that you brought it up, is that, a lot of men right now, it seems like they're like in relationships with their phone or their laptop or, pornography in general. And I'm bringing this up because, I'm, as a 36-year-old single woman, I'm still out here single. I've noticed that, men aren't as open as I believe they were like in my younger years, like in my teenage years and things like that. I feel like if a guy saw a girl that he liked, he went straight at her and started talking to her and getting to know her and things like that. But I noticed that in my older years, and some of my friends who are, still single in this age bracket, we're noticing that like men aren't approaching us. And I'm just wondering if that could be directly tied to the fact that so many men are in relationships with their devices rather than with real people, so they don't have that practice of actually forming connections with women. Any insight on that or opinions?
Absolutely. That is what's happening, because as I was saying earlier, the brain of these men actually cannot differentiate between what is happening on their phone and what is reality. Their brain believes that they have achieved they are on a successful campaign at the moment of spreading maximum genetic diversity with a wide, novel range of new women. Their phone is not just something they look at for communicating with their friends and with, Googling how the game went. Their phone is their vehicle to their addiction, and they cannot lose their phone at all costs. And when they are glued to their phone, I can tell you that men are in relationship with their phone, and they are unable to have a fulfilling relationship with the most beautiful woman that's so meant for them walking right by them. They will not be able to see it because their neurology is being devastated by the powerful super stimulus of ejaculatory masturbation to pornography.
There are a lot of men that would find, porn and the sex and that being like, that's just, you know, what we do. That's being masculine. That's, you know, just me being my masculine energy. And like, what do you think about that?
I think that's an excuse. It's like any addiction, there's an endless multitude of excuses people make, whether an alcoholic, cocaine addict. This is no different, and there should be no shame in this because it is an addiction. That's what we need to recognize as a society, that the great pornography experiment is a massive addiction for millions of men in America.
And it's so interesting to me that, you know, a lot of people wouldn't see it as sexual immorality. You know, I feel like, you know, just tying back to, you know, God, you know, when people think about sexual immorality, they're thinking about, okay, maybe like rape or maybe even fornication, you know, pedophilia, like those types of things. But being addicted to porn is a prime example of sexual immorality, because as we've been talking about here today, it's killing relationships, something that God created for man and woman to flourish in, meaningful connections, because we talked about, you know, sex being used for procreation. That's why, you know, ejaculation happens. And then sex is mainly for bonding. You know, when you read Genesis, you know, we read that Adam cleaved to Eve, you know, and that's what that's rooted in that bonding, you know. And I think that that's what's missing from a lot of people. And I think for a lot of people, and I think you said that earlier, it's just that we're misinformed. And a lot of people don't even know that if you want some of the best relationship advice, the best place to go to is the Bible, because it's written out like right there for us, you know. So yeah.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because you know, this is a dopamine addiction, and that dopamine cycle, that crash, that depletion that's happening with causes men and women, but mainly men in this case, to do things that are amoral, that they would never do normally. So what happens is, because the novelty has to continue to get the same dopamine hit, which is depleting every time that you get satiated to a new novel experience sexually with ejaculation, these men are forced to increase the content, the immorality of the content they're watching, to the point where, fascinatingly enough, many men actually graduate to pornography that they would never dream they would have watched, but they don't know why they're watching it. And the reason why is because this is a neurological addiction with massively depleted dopamine levels and receptor sites.
And since we were kind of speaking about religion a little bit, why did you dedicate this book to God?
Well, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have written this book without God. God was the one that pulled me out of that dark, deep canyon that I'd fallen into, where everything I reached for and was grasping for had eluded me and fallen away from me. And all I could do was seek refuge and solace in God. It was God that gave me not only my sexual confidence and identity back, which is so important to men and women, but for those in relationships, but much more than I ever could have imagined, much more than I could have dreamt of. I never dreamt that I would have transformed on this level like this. And that's because the NoFap, you know, graduates, you know, we are now restored healthy levels of dopamine with bonding-based behaviors where that's linked with higher oxytocin levels. So now we have balanced dopamine, oxytocin, and God is now able to transform us because our dopamine is normalized, and we're able to pursue those things in life that the dopamine depletion is not allowing us to do.
I would love to know, like, what any particular healing modality that you talk about in your book, if you could share one with our listeners, what you found to be effective, just one of them.
Sure. Well, I covered the neurological and relational healing modalities that I are the foundation for my book and what I'm most passionate about. I haven't really got into the physical healing modalities, which are lengthy, all holistic. One thing I've mentioned since I'm on a feminine podcast is something I'm extremely excited about, which is for women that are aging and have decreasing levels of testosterone. There is a lot of cutting edge science now showing that pellet testosterone replacement therapy, or pellet TRT, which are bioidentical natural pellets that are placed underneath the skin, lasts for about 3 to 6 months, that this has incredible benefits for men and women. But for women, there's this, not only do they benefit the same ways as men sexually and as far as burning fat and building up lean muscle, but it's now shown, fascinating enough, that it actually can be used as a mono treatment for cancer, for tumors, as well as completely alleviates all symptoms of menopause. And there's a lot of misconceptions around this because women are because of some faulty studies that had to do with synthetic estrogen and in the past, been dissuaded from pellet TRT. But now the true studies holistically are showing that are being practiced holistically. But these studies are by scientists, are showing that it holds enormous benefits for women. I also want to talk briefly about diet. I recommend a plant-based diet because it protects us from the 15 leading causes of death in the world. And there's myths around that, as far as that's another big myth, that it actually has the same protein levels and amino acid levels as animal-based foods, but without the carcinogen, saturated fats, and without those negative attributes. And I also recommend intermittent fasting I recommend intermittent fasting, as well as just any way to get rid of fat, because fat, surface fat and visceral fat. Visceral fat is actually around the organs and is linked with troublesome diseases like neurodegenerative diseases and diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So burning off surface fat, and even if we have the money to jumpstart getting a smart liposculpture, it's actually not just a cosmetic procedure. It's actually an invaluable tool for getting rid of surface fat, which more easily allows us to burn the visceral fat, which is a especially dangerous form of fat. And so it's important to note at the same time that if you do intermittent fasting actually burns it's the only way to burn visceral fat. But getting rid of that surface fat and practicing intermittent fasting allows us to burn off the visceral fat, which is what we really want to get rid of, surface and especially visceral fat.
I loved this conversation. Loved it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad to have been able to share it with you, and thank you for being open to this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, Chiquita. I mean, I totally understand how the plight that is affecting women today is incredibly real, and it has gotten worse. It has definitely gotten worse. And I'm afraid to say that in some ways it might be getting worse still until we raise more awareness around this issue. So I'm really hoping that women can help men, because men are not in a position to help themselves right now in so many cases. So when starting a relationship or renewing an existing relationship, it's really important to have these firm requests in the relationship, that you know what to look for. You know what is insidious and poisonous to the relationship, which is pornography, ejaculation, and mating, climactic-driven sex. These are even the best well-intentioned matches will be laid waste with this destructive behaviors that we have.
It's hard out here. It really is. But
It is.
I'm a woman of faith, And, I believe that, God is working on the man for me. He's not just going to be any old person, as I obviously, he has to really work within his heart and his spirit and soul, to be a great partner. So.
Well, now you have the tools to know what to look for and what to request in a relationship. So now that you have those tools, that'll be able to help you,
Yeah.
But yes, I wish you all the best in your journey. And I think God will lead you to the right person. So,
yeah. Amen. I believe that.
I do want to ask, because I think this is something Chiquita and I were kind of talking about before. If you think it's more of like is this specifically, or I guess majorly, a Western issue? Because I do find that, like a lot of women are importing mates. I happen to be one of them. And it's like, that's not really the kind of, it's not that kind of issue that we're dealing with. Yeah, I think men are just different from elsewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Tao, Tantra, Karetsa have been practicing these practices for millennia. There is generally more holistic health approaches. Diet is very much more in line with what I'm recommending. Western culture, with our corporate structure, has the most fundamental parts of our lives upside down. The way we approach all these aspects of our lives, our sexual habits, our diet, our healthcare, it has it all upside down and backwards. And we just need to realize that. We need to realize that we need to start looking out for ourselves. I always recommend in my book to people that we think for ourselves. We study the science, and anything we put in our mouth or anything that we engage as a new practice, that we run it by, our own heart, God, and research it thoroughly to know exactly what it is. That's really important to do.
Yeah.
But yes, it is it seems to be more of a Western approach that is fundamentally flawed.
Okay. All right. Well, Brooke, thank you so much for all of the wisdom and knowledge and gems that you have dropped with us here today on the Feminine Waters podcast. Our first male guest was a smash hit, and we are wishing you all of the best in your endeavors. I know the book is coming out soon. Tell us where people can find you and also find the book. I know after listening to this, there will be men that are like, how can I get in contact with this guy? How can we form community? How can I, get with him to help me change my life and get on a better path? How do people find you?
Well, I have my website, brookehazen.com. That's BROOKEHAZEN, brookehazen.com. I have links and resources for all the men and women out there that are desperately needing direction. I have my book. I encourage people to read my book and to highlight it and keep it by their side as they embark on this incredibly difficult but incredibly rewarding journey. My book is in English, Spanish, and Chinese. I have an audio that is in my own voice, which I also highly recommend because it gives the tone behind my words. And it's kind of nice to have the author with his own voice reading his own book. Mm-hmm. This will all be available on the links on my website through Amazon, which is a lot of people now are using Amazon as authors, both in the paperback, Kindle, and audio versions.
Nice. And do you have any, do you do any conferences or have any groups or run any no-fap groups or anything?
Yeah, so I'm going to have my audio on Remojo. I'm also planning to do, and I'll be posting this on my website as time goes on, but I do want to get some intensive seminars going. I don't know how often it would be, but I'm going to reserve it for those people that have really read the book, really understand the transformation that they want to make and are quite serious about making these transformations. And I want to have sort of like a real kind of seminar that would sort of indoctrinate people into this new journey that they're going to be undertaking that's so transformative for the positivity and growth in their life.
Love it. Looking forward to that. I mean, I don't know if I can attend, but either way.
Yeah, I don't know how I'll do it yet. I might do it virtually also. I'm not sure yet. But
virtually would be amazing as well. So yeah, definitely keep that in mind. Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah. Wow, such a pleasure being on your podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Brooke.
Hope that my podcast appearance can help your listeners.
Yes, I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will. This type of information, it all it can do is spread in a positive light. I believe that wholeheartedly. So
yeah, I mean, like I said before, there are really millions of men that are going through the experience I went through, and I completely understand what they're going through and how traumatic and depressing and disempowering that process is, how it's the enormous hit to the confidence and sense of identity. I completely get it. I've been through it, and that's why I wrote this book, why God had me write this book, was to help those that are needing help right now, to show them a light that I went through and had to blaze myself, that there is absolutely a holistic, positive way through this that will transform your life, not only sexually, but in all areas of your life.
I think the great thing is that you were aware, because awareness, some people just don't even know there's a problem with them. So yeah, I think awareness probably came from God. That's the importance of surrendering. So
exactly, that's why I dedicated my book to God.
So listeners, I hope you really enjoyed this. I'm sure you did. I know you did. And we will see you on the very next episode of the Feminine Waters podcast.